All right. This is a one and only warning. We are talking about spoilers. We're not going to be talking about very many story-based spoilers, but we will be talking about every new Pokemon that will be coming to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So if you're not interested in seeing that, you have been warned. And I think that's fair enough. Let's start by looking at the images of all the new Pokemon. I think these kinds of videos are always fun to look at in retrospect because 2 years down the line, my opinions will have changed on some of these Pokemon. Certain Pokemon may look cool now but turn out to be complete garbage later on, or certain Pokemon might grow on me. Certain Pokemon might look cool and are cool, but after using them so often in competitive Pokemon over the course of 2 or 3 years, they can sort of wear on you. And of course, the other thing that's interesting is to see at the beginning of a new metagame, certain things will look crazy, like Pelipper getting Drizzle. Wow, Pelipper got Drizzle, that's huge news, and now it's old hat, right? Everybody knows that Pelipper gets Drizzle, that's what it does. And so, things that can redefine a Pokemon or shape the metagame suddenly become banal in comparison later on. And so, it's always fun to make these kinds of videos in the heat of things, when things are leaking, when new information is coming out, and then look back at how little we understood about that, 2 or 3 years down the line. So I wanted to make a video today so I could do that myself. Alright, so let's look at these new Pokemon. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to give my impression on how I think they look design-wise first off, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look at their competitive qualities. We only have a little bit of information, so I want to make that part a little bit short, but the more I thought about it, the more intrigued I was by it, so it may not be as short as I'd like it to be. Anyway, the Sprigatito line, I think the middle evolution is actually the best out of the three, and Meowscarada is a lame name and not really that great. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of this Pokemon in competitive. I think it's going to be really broken, or at least really annoying, even if it's not broken. So, unfortunately, we'll be seeing a lot of it, but I don't like its design. I never really liked smug Pokemon, though. Now, Fuecoco is the starter that I thought looked cutest out of the three. And looking at the final evolution, when I first saw Skeledirge, I was like, nah, no way. Especially because Skeledirge was one of the first Pokemon that got revealed through leaks. And so people thought maybe that it wasn't a real one. But it is a real leak. And that is the design that they're going with. I think it's fine. It's not my favorite. I think that the difference in design between Fuecoco and Skeledirge is really night and day. Like just looking at, I mean, obviously this is a drawn picture versus a 3D model, and so there's some difference there. But I just feel that the amount of detail and weird little subtle here and there there's a very big difference between that and Fuecoco, and I wish that either Fuecoco had been more designed or Skeledirge had been less over-designed. And I think I would have preferred the latter. Anyway, I think I'm probably going to go with Skeledirge still out of these three. I think that I like Fuecoco the best, and I dislike Skeledirge the least. So, going on to the duck line, we've got Quaquaval, which is a really dumb name. And this Pokemon seems like it's also going to be very good and competitive, but is also really, This is the kind of Pokemon is not my thing. The Sassy Duck has been done multiple times, most recently in Breath of the Wild, and it's just not my thing. Alright, moving on, we've got Wattrel, which I don't even think looks like a Pokemon. It looks like the Linux Penguin to me, or something out of a bad Pixar movie, or a DreamWorks movie even more so. And Kilowattrel looks like out of Madagascar. Just not doesn't look like a Pokemon to me. It's super weird. But that's just me. Then we've got Nimble and Low Kicks, and these I think look really cool. Nimble sort of throws me for a loop because I don't know what its eyes is supposed to be. Are its eyes these things, or are they the things on the side of his head? I think that they're supposed to be the things on the side of his head, but I don't know. And the Low Kicks is pretty cool looking. I heard a Common Rider bug and I didn't really get excited for it, but this is pretty cool. Squawkabilly, nah, Not a fan of the pompadour look, and not a big, like, are these macaws, parrots, whatever they are? Not a big fan of those. Blink alone, pass. But like, cool if you're into pig Pokemon. It's not a bad design, I guess. Bidops looks interesting. It sort of looks like a Rock'em Sock'em robot almost. I don't know what it's supposed to be based off of, but it's not the worst thing ever, I suppose. However, Tarantula, that's how I say it, Tarantula. This just looks like Eldegoss. So every time I see it, I always think it should be a grass type, but this pure bug is not Eldegoss. Alright, the Palmy line, I think that they really cheaped out on. Why do they all look practically identical? There's very little difference between all three of these, and I don't really know how I feel about that. I just feel like I don't like them. I didn't like Palmy when we first saw it, and I still continue to not like it. That's just me though. And then we get to the Smoliv line. I love Smoliv, I think it's adorable. And Dolliv is also really cute. This Pokemon, I forget its name, it is on the other list, so we'll look at it in a bit. But I think the Olive Pokemon looks pretty interesting. I don't really know if that's how olive trees look, but I do like olives a lot, so I'll be picking this up for my team for sure. Now we've got Knackley, Knacklistack, and Garganacl. And I believe this has to be pronounced Knackley, because this is clearly Garganacl, like Tabernacle. And I don't know what the Garga part is, but if this is Garganacl, then I'm assuming the Knackley is how you're supposed to pronounce that, Knacklistack. It looks, there's been lots of Minecraft jokes about the last two, and then this is clearly just a Mario Mushroom. And this is undeniably Mario Mushroom. I don't know what the heck they were doing with that. But it's a really cute name. It's iodized salt. And Garganacl is actually pretty cool. I might pick this up, but this is one of the maybes. I have a slot open that I have to play around with, but it might go on the team. Okay. Fido is interesting, but looks sort of like Yamper to me, so I wasn't too interested in it. Doxbun is really a tonal shift from Fido just because it looks like so much different, but it makes total sense when you think about it. Once you have enough like toasted, or like once you baked a bread product, it would turn into a toasty color like this. And so I think that's actually thematically pretty strong, as opposed to what happened to Yamper, which it turned into Bolton, which didn't look anything at all like it. So I'm okay with this. Mastiff, this is a Pokemon I would have expected on a 90s sassy dog t-shirt that your deadbeat dad drinking beer would wear. No, that doesn't look like a Pokemon to me. Mabostiff does okay in terms of Pokemon design. I think it looks a little more like a Pokemon. Apparently there are two forms to this, a day form and a night form. I think the night form looks cooler, but I think they're actually both pretty equally valid. I think that the day form just looks like a straight up doggo. Like, that's not even a Pokemon, that's just a dog. But it's alright. It's fine by me. Pure dark type. All the dogs are pure typings, which I think is going to hinder them a bit, just because being a monotype is usually not a good thing. But we'll see. Then you got Grievard and Houndstone. Houndstone reminds me of a Muppet, sort of with this mouth. I don't know why, but it's alright. Not my cup of tea, but it's cool. It's a strong design at the very least. Then Flittle and Esparta. I think this is Esparta. I don't know though. I don't like these Pokemon at all. This, I don't know what the heck they were doing. What is it even supposed to be? A UFO? Like a Kirby UFO? I think it's supposed to be an ostrich egg, but I ain't no ostrich egg I've ever seen. And then this is an ostrich, clearly. It looks like something out of the Fifth Element. Really weird and wacky. Then we've got the dolphin Pokemon. We've been asking for years for a dolphin, and they finally delivered. We've got Finizen, and then I forget what this is called. It's not listed here, because this is an older image, but we'll get back to it. This Pokemon is weird. I saw one person compare the dolphin to a toothpaste mascot, and I don't necessarily disagree with that opinion. it does look like a toothpaste mascot. So I'm not a big fan of it now, but it might grow on me depending on how it plays. Then we got Gimmighoul and its evolution, and its evolution looks dorky as all get out. I'm not a big fan of it, and I'm not a really big Gimmighoul fan either, but I would have been a bigger fan of it if it hadn't evolved into something like this. It looks like a combination of Gumby, a string cheese mascot, and then Gold Mario. Very weird. Then you got Vavoom and Revavroom, or Varoom and Revavroom, and they look pretty similar to each other. They're okay. I think it's cool to have an engine Pokemon. I just feel like it was more designed to be on the cars for Team Star and less designed to be its own thing. And so it looks sort of funky without the car, but it's okay. Tadbulb is actually heckin' adorable, and I love Tadbulb. I don't really like Bellabolt personally as much, but Tadbulb is a-okay in my book. On the other hand, though, we have Cetoddle, which is the pre-evo to Cetitan, and Cetoddle I think looks creepy. It looks like a scary children's mascot and or a rage comic face, and that just does not make me happy. So, I'm going to pass on that one. Then we've got the much anticipated Fairy Steel of this generation. There have been lots of leaks and rumors about this Pokemon being super busted and whatever. I don't know how I feel about this one. It's one of those Pokemon with lore attached to it where it's like, oh, they're beating me up and taking my hammer. And then it turns into this Pokemon that can just beat everybody up with the hammer. But you'd think they would have a better family structure system where the people with the hammers would protect the ones without the hammer, but I guess that's not how they roll. I think they're sort of weird. They look almost like claymation bunnies or something. I don't know what the heck is going on here. Not the worst Pokemon though, so I'll be interested to see how it plays. Dondozo, or Dondozo or whatever, is another big catfish, and it sort of actually has a lot of similarities with Whiscash and some of the other Pokemon like that. So I don't really have big expectations for it, but it definitely is a Pokemon that exists. Now we've got Relor and whatever the heck its evolution is, I forget. And it's a dung beetle Pokemon. It's sort of interesting because it's how do we make a dung beetle cool? Well, let's make it as a psychic type, and it's got like a psychic orb now. That's sort of cool. But at the same time, it is still a dung beetle, and I'm not really into that, so I'm going to pass on that. And then we've got the Tumbleweed Pokemon, and I didn't really realize that Spain was known for Tumbleweed. I thought that would have been more of an American Southwest thing, but what do I know? Maybe there's tons of Tumbleweed in Spain. It's a Grass Ghost, which we have so many Grass Ghost Pokemon, and my big problem with these Pokemon is that I don't really see them as anything but literal Tumbleweed. Like, does it have a face? Does it have a mouth? Well, what is going on here? So I definitely want to see more of that before I make a better judgment. But as of right now, it just looks like Tumbleweed, and that's it. Capsace Kid is a great name. Capsaicin and Kid. Great name. Then it evolves into Scovillain, which is also a very good name. However, Scovillain freaks me out. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. Very creepy looking. It's our first grass fire type, though. Not necessarily the most original when it comes to how do we make a grass fire type? Well, you make the peppers. Yeah, okay. Good job. That was really using your brain. But it doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit creepy. And we got Flamigo. Great name. It's a penguin. We're not sure why it's tying its neck up like that. It might be because it's like one of those inflatable penguins. That's not a penguin, a flamingo. It's supposed to be like an inflatable flamingo, but I've never had one in my yard. Do you usually tie the neck off like this? I don't know what the heck is going on there. Then we've got this flower looking thing, and it's Poison Rock, which is Nihilego typing. It looks super epic, but I don't know if it will be epic. So very interesting how it's designed like almost like a legendary or something, and yet it's actually not that strong. Then Charcadet evolves into Armarouge and Ceruledge. I'm really hoping this isn't a baby Pokemon. I don't know if people have been trying to breed them. We'll have to see in future if this is a baby. That's really going to tick me off because I hate dealing with baby Pokemon and breeding. But besides that, it's okay. Here's a Pokemon I think is really adorable. We've got Tandemouse and Mousehold. Now these Pokemon look like they could be straight out of Hello Kitty. And it's so weird because you got 2 Pokemon as one Pokemon, and you got 4 Pokemon as one Pokemon. And that's cool. I like these Pokemon. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to make the team, and later on we'll see why. Next we got Strudel and Graphite. We already seen Graphite, of course. And Strudel is the pre-evo. I think it doesn't look very good at all. I think this is a pretty weak Pokemon personally. But hey, you gotta have a pre-evo to Graphite, I guess. Even though I think this totally could have been its own Pokemon by itself. Did not need a pre-evo. But I guess they didn't agree. And so we got one. Alright, next up we've got Wiglet and Wugtrio. So Wugtrio was the joke name that people were giving it. But no, it is actually Wugtrio. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be coral or if it's actually another kind of eel or something. In principle, I don't hate it. I think it sort of makes sense with how the direction they were going. It's still Dugtrio and Diglett, right? And so giving it a bit of color is nice. I don't mind this Pokemon, at least design-wise. This... Oh, where do we go? This next Pokemon, we got Toedscool and Toedscruel. It looks really funny because they're standing on feet, which is not immediately apparent when you're looking at this, but these are feet, not tentacles anymore. And I think that's actually really funny. I think this is actually a super cool convergent evolution for Tentacool and Tentacruel. So I'm excited to see how these things do. They are 4 times weak to ice, which, you know, not great, but, you know, I think they can make it work. I think they can make it work, and we'll see why here in a bit. Orthworm is a big worm. I saw somebody on Reddit saying this looks like a Happy Meal, or it looks like a McDonald's play place, and I tend to agree. It looks like a McDonald's play place, and I think that if I got one on my team, I'd name it Play Place. Now, this Pokemon looks like it should be really big, like sort of an Onyx kind of thing, but in game it's actually pretty small. It is supposed to be an earthworm after all, so I think if it had been bigger, that I would have liked it better, but it is sort of small in the end. So, I don't know. It's alright. It's a pretty cute Pokemon. It makes some pretty cute faces in the game, but that's about all I have to say about it right now. Bombardier is a stork carrying stuff in its tail. I don't know exactly what this is supposed to be, but it's not carrying babies. It's carrying bombs. That's pretty clever. I can't hate on this. And we've got this really cool Pokemon, Veluza. It's a really cool, like, I don't even know if this is supposed to be like piranha, kind of scary. I think hake is what it's called. Fish. I like this fish. It looks cool. Water Psychic, way better design-wise than Bruxish. So I will take that. We got Cloth. We've already seen Cloth. Next up, we got Tatsuguri. Tatsuguri actually goes along with Dondozo. They're sort of like a 2-in-1 kind of Pokemon. I don't know why they're so far apart on the decks, but they are. Tatsuguri comes in multiple flavors because it's like a sushi Pokemon. And I guess there's different forms of sushi. I think this shrimp one, it should be sort of the main one, or considered to be the main one. But all of them are fine. I haven't seen all of them. I think there's 4 maybe, and there's only 3 here. But, it's alright. It's a pretty cute Pokemon, but I would hardly think of it as a Pokemon, even frankly. It looks more like a mascot character for a sushi restaurant that they turned into a Pokemon. I think a lot of these don't actually really look like traditional Pokemon. I think that Pokemon is sort of deviating really far from what originally their design philosophy was. And some people are going to love that and some people are going to hate that. So it just depends on how you like Pokemon. Now we got our Pseudo-Legendary. And the baby of that looks really stupid, not gonna lie. I do not like the Pseudo-Legendary this gen at all. This one looks like a really dumb Hanna-Barbera character. This one looks just like a dinosaur. Like straight up that's just a dinosaur or something. And we got Baxcalibur, which is the final evil evolution. It's like Duraludon meets Godzilla. It's alright. It's nothing to write home about in my opinion. It's okay. We've already seen Cyclizar. Annihilate is the final evo of Primeape, or because Primeape was the final evo before, but it's a new evolution for Primeape, and I think it's pretty cool. It's interesting because it deviates from the Primeape and Mankey color scheme. Primeape and Mankey were sort of this sandy tan color, and Annihilate goes full on like dark gray black color. And although it does get rid of that initial color scheme, it's a ghost, so it makes sense. It's pretty cool design wise. I'm not like a huge fan, but I definitely can get behind it. We got Clodsire, and I think this is one of the most adorable designs ever. Definitely putting Clodsire on the team like immediately as soon as I can. Clodsire, for all intents and purposes, is going to be the starter of my playthrough. Next up, we got the Dunsparce. The Dunsparce is hardly different from Dunsparce. It's really hard to tell them apart, funnily enough. But there are like 2 forms of this at least. One with 2 sections and one with 3 sections. So if you can find whichever form you like better, go nuts. Very weird. Some people are saying it's because Dunsparce was supposed to be like this super rare Pokemon, and then you get it and it's really disappointing. And so then, after 20 years of people saying it needs an evolution, Game Freak finally gives us an evolution, and it's also disappointing. And I think that's supposed to be the joke, but it's not really a funny joke in my opinion. Alright, Ferrigraph we've seen, that's going on the team as well. Then we've got King Gambit, which is the evolution of Bisharp. I think it's a really good name. King Gambit is a good name. I don't really know if this adds much value to Bisharp. Obviously it adds value to Bisharp because now Bisharp can Eviolite, and that makes Bisharp super bulky, but as an evolution to Bisharp was already really strong, so you don't really see that much in terms of stat increase to King Gambit. And I think overall the loss in speed might be made up for by the increase in power and bulk, but overall the 2 are going to be pretty evenly matched, I think, and it'll be a toss-up as to which one comes out in the end as the more viable Pokemon in high tier. And then we've got these 4 legendaries, and the pictures here aren't great, so I'm going to return back to these guys later. But let me just say right now, the 4 legendaries, the legendary quartet of this generation, not a really big fan of them. I like the fish the best though. I think the fish looks okay. The other ones I can do without personally. We've already seen Koraidon and Miraidon. And then we have to get to a few other Pokemon. Because they're here at the bottom. We've got the Regional Tauros. Regional Tauros comes in 3 flavors. They're all fighting type. And they all look very similar, but they are not the same. You've got a pure fighting type, which I don't think is very good. Like, why would you want a pure fighting type when you could get a fighting type plus something else? Then you got fighting in fire and fighting in water. I'm going to pick the fighting in water because, first of all, my team needs a water type. And also because bulls were, on Crete and often combined with Poseidon, right? Bull and Poseidon, that sort of a thing. So I think a water type bull really makes a lot of sense for Pokemon, and so I'm glad to see it here. And so I'm definitely going to be picking up this Regional Tauros. So finally I want to talk about the designs for the Paradox Pokemon, because they're very interesting. Some of them could be considered controversial just in terms of what they do to the Pokemon. So you've got the ones that we've already sort of seen with the Donphan. You've got Great Tusk and Iron Treads. I think Iron Treads definitely looks cooler, but Great Tusks isn't bad too. Slitherwing is fighting for your attention with Iron Moth. And Iron Moth, I like everything technological, robotic, and things like that, so I definitely like Iron Moth better. But Slitherwing definitely is really cool too. Brute Bonnet, design-wise, is very interesting. It has a tail, which people were saying, why does a mushroom have a tail? Well, I don't know. But everything in the past, I feel like had a tail, right? And so maybe it became vestigial in later Amoonguss, I don't know. I think it's weirder to see Amoonguss with feet. That was the thing that weirded me out. And then you've got Scream Tail, which is Jigglypuff. It's not really a tail, it's more like a ponytail. So I guess that's a tail of sorts. But I actually don't like this one. It looks really weird. Like, why does it have this hair thing at all? But it's okay. Fluttermane just looks like Misdreavus. but it's okay, I guess. Sandy Shocks. Sandy Shocks actually looks pretty cool. I actually sort of like how this Magneton has turned into having legs and stuff. I definitely can get behind this Magneton. Then you've got the Roaring Moon Salamence form, which looks almost like Mega Men's, is what everybody says, and I can sort of get behind it. It is sort of weird to see the dragon that wanted to fly lose its flying type, but maybe this was back in the day when it didn't know how to use its wings yet, and so it didn't fly. Who knows? Who can say? But that's what the design they went with. And then we've got Iron Valiant, which I'm sure everybody would be expecting me to be super excited for. I'm actually reserving judgment until I see it in game, because all the models have been sort of mid up until now, and so I really want to see what it looks like as it moves and get a close-up of the model to see if I like what they've done. Because this is a Pokemon, of course, I'm going to care very much about, but it's been hard for me to get a clear shot as to what they're doing. Then Iron Hands is sort of an interesting one. It looks like something out of a Saturday morning cartoon from the 2000s or something. I can't decide if I love it or I hate it. Iron Bundle, the Delibird, pretty adorable. Delibird's always been sort of cute, and this looks like a little robot version of a Delibird. But then at the same time, we'll see its stats and realize that this could just be a holy terror, and maybe it won't be so cute after that. We've got Iron Jugulus, which is just Hydreigon but a robot. Sort of a weak design in terms of like, what are you going to do to change Hydreigon? We'll just make it a robot. But at the same time, I mean, it's pretty scary. I'd freak out if I saw it in real life. Same thing with Iron Thorns, which is just Tyranitar, but they put a Pokemon Uranium filter over it. So, it's okay. So let's get into a couple of other things. Now, we've got here, because I sort of held off on making this list, we've got finally the stats, and we've got some more data about it on this sheet. Now, there could be some mistakes here, but that's half the fun of this, is going back and seeing all the mistakes and information you didn't have at the time of making these kinds of videos. So I just want to quickly run through the stats and the abilities for these Pokemon and talk about some things that I noted. And the first thing I actually want to do is I want to start off with the Legends Arceus Pokemon, because those are going to be in the game, at least when Home comes out. And there are a couple of notable things that have happened. So we've got Wordier, nothing seems to have changed here. But then we get to Kleavor, and we see that Kleavor has the hidden ability of Sharpness. Now, Sharpness is a new ability, so we're going to come over here, and we're going to look at new abilities. And we have to find Sharpness on this list. Sharpness is down here. It says powers up slicing moves. So if we're going to assume that this is like a Iron Fist boost, right? It's like is it a 20 or 30% boost, whatever it is. So that's not terrible. And then you think about, what is a slicing move that Kleavor would get? Well, it gets Stone Axe, which is one, and it gets X Scissor. So those at least cover its dual stab. And so Sharpness isn't a bad ability for it. It's not the same as Technician, but in terms of what Kleavor is going to be getting, right? Unless it gets Accelerock, in which case Technician maybe could have been better for that, but that's about it. Then Sharpness, that's not bad. We'll take it. But the question is going to be, do you want to use Sharpness or do you want to use Sheer Force? One of the most powerful things about Sheer Force is that you can use a Life Orb with it, and you don't take Life Orb recoil if the move you used is a Sheer Force move. So, if Kleavor has moves that Sheer Force can abuse, then maybe it'll be more powerful to use Sheer Force instead of Sharpness. Now, what moves would those be? Well, it can run Rock Slide, and it can run Lunge, probably. If it gets those two moves, those are Sheer Force boosted, and would be more powerful than X Scissor, especially because they're using the Life Orb in tandem with them, right? Than Stone Axe and X Scissor. But it all comes down at the end of the day on what Kleavor gets and how useful it is. For instance, Rock Slide can flinch in theory, but not with Sheer Force. With Sharpness and Stone Axe, I can put up Stealth Rock. And if I can have a move that sets up Stealth Rock for free while I'm attacking you, well, maybe that's useful. However, on the other hand, if Stone Axe isn't that strong of a move, maybe I'd prefer to have Sheer Force Rock Slide. I don't know. But that's one thing that remains to be seen. Ursaluna is doing Ursaluna things. We have known that this is going to be a really scary Pokemon. So when it comes to the game, we'll have to watch out for that. Basculegion. Basculegion gets Swift Swim now. This replaces Rattled on it. It had Rattled previously, which actually was sort of an interesting ability on it for bug types specifically. But now it doesn't get that anymore. Now it gets Swift Swim. And this is actually really big because if you look at its speed stat, it's got 78 speed. In rain, 78 speed isn't awful. Now, facing opposing rain sweepers is pretty bad because you've got things. Basically, all Swift Swimmers are going to hit fast in 78 speed, right? You've got Kingdra, you've got the Gen 8 fish that's, I can't remember off the top of my head because I kept on thinking Basculegion. Barraskewda, you got Barraskewda, right? Barraskewda, of course, is super fast. I think maybe Seismitoad is even faster. I forget what Seismitoad hits. Maybe it's in this range. But 78 speed in rain isn't too bad. So Swift Swim is a really decent ability for it. And you get that Wave Crash ability, or move, which is just Flare Blitz for water. So think about that 120 base power water move in rain and compare that to Liquidation from Barraskewda. If you slap a Choice Band on this, that's really powerful. However, you know what else is powerful? It's adaptability. An adaptability, Choice Band, Wave Crash, seems like it would be very scary as well. And now you're going to be back down to your 78 base speed. But if you're just trying to break some fat in a lower tier, because maybe you can't hack it and know you, and if the lower tiers don't allow Drizzle, because in previous generations, most lower tiers have not allowed Drizzle, or alternatively, if Pelipper is the only Drizzle Pokemon and it's stuck in OU and you're not, then you wouldn't be able to get good rain options, and so adaptability would probably be your next best bet. And I think that actually is still quite good. So I think the Basculegion could be quite scary once it comes out. But we'll have to see what it gets for coverage, because Water and Ghost isn't bad, but if you got a physical water move and you don't get Poltergeist, then you're going to be stuck with Shadow Ball, and in which case maybe you want to run female Basculegion, and if you do that, then you don't have that strong attack stat, which means you have to run Hydro Pump instead. It's a whole song and dance, and you have to figure it out based off of what it's going to end up with coverage in the end. Sneasler gets Unburden and Poison Touch. Very scary. Sneasler is going to be a problem. But the question is, what can Sneasler unburden itself with? And that remains to be seen. But Poison Touch in and of itself is going to be an annoying ability for sure on it. Overquill, similar to what I had before. Namorous, this is the next one that changed. So Namorous before had Healer as a main ability. Now it gets Cute Charm. That is extremely annoying. So Namorous, if you look at his stats, 135 special attack, 106 speed, 115 attack. So it can run a very effective mixed attacking set with good speed stat in the OU tier, and it has Cute Charm. So either one, you ban Cute Charm, which effectively bans Namorous unless we have the ability patch, in which case I guess it can get contrary, or you just allow it to run Cute Charm, in which case I really want to put all of my Pokemon as female just going forward, because I don't want to have to deal with Cute Charm's nonsense. I think that I would put all my Pokemon female just so I don't have to deal with Namorous, at least for the near future. Alright, so Sprigatito's line. Meowscarada gets 123 speed, 110 attack. So it's going to be a physical attacker with Protean, and it's got to move that can always crit, so that's really annoying. So we're going to have to watch out for this Pokemon for sure. Skeledirge has pretty disappointing stats, but also not too disappointing because we knew they were going to be not great. Just looking at Fuecoco, seeing this speed of 66 is actually not bad. Like, I was thinking it could be 60, 55, something in that range. So 66, I'll take it. It's not the end of the world. You got speed base 65s, and once you get past that point as a bulky attacker, I think 66 is actually pretty decent overall. 104 HP means you can take a decent number of hits with 100 defense and 75 SPDF. And 110 special attack is nothing to cough at. So I think that Skeledirge won't be a very good Pokemon, but it definitely isn't too bad. Then finally we got Quaquaval, who's 120 attack and 85 speed. So right off the bat, comparing that to Meowscarada, one would think Meowscarada has the upper hand. However, Quaquaval has a move that raises its speed stat by 1 stage every time it uses it. And it's got Moxie. So Moxie means that this Pokemon can really snowball really quickly if you give it a chance. And Quaquaval is going to be water fighting. So imagine this. It gets Aqua Step, which is a move that gives it +1 speed. It gets Close Combat because it's a physical fighting attacker. And then it is a bird, so it's probably going to get Brave Bird. So you got those 3 moves plus Swords Dance and Moxie. All of a sudden, this Pokemon looks really scary all of a sudden, doesn't it? So I actually predict that Quaquaval could put in a lot of work. And this is especially true in a metagame if Toxapex is not very useful and Slowbro isn't very good because these Pokemon have gotten nerfed with the reduction in their PP to recover. Then all of a sudden a water fighting type becomes very scary again. And I could definitely see Quaquaval putting in a lot of work if those Pokemon are less prevalent, right? Even something like Corviknight doesn't want to have to take +2 close combat or +3 close combat if it's got a Moxie boost. Alright, next up, we've got Oinkologne. Oinkologne has 2 different forms. I think it's the male and female form, and I'm not sure which is which. The Lingering Aroma is like Mummy, where it's going to get rid of the opponent's ability if it touches them. And then they'll have Lingering Aroma. And so it's sort of like Mummy, basically. I'm not a big Mummy fan, but they do also have Thick Fat and Gluttony. So depending on what you want to do with them, you have those options. I think Thick Fat probably is the safest option if we had to take a bet. I don't think this Pokemon is going to be able to abuse Gluttony. It doesn't look like a Belly Drummer. Maybe it'll get Belly Drum, who knows? Now, this one gets 100 attack, and the other one only gets 90. And they only have 65 speed. I definitely think this Pokemon is going to be bottom of the barrel, trash, normal type. So let's not worry ourselves about Oinkologne. The Dunsparce has 125 HP and got 100 attack stats. So overall, it's not awful, but it's still a pure normal type. Still has the same abilities. And overall, the Dunsparce, I don't expect too much out of it. Next up, we got Spidops, and Spidops is trash. Like, what are you supposed to do with this? 35 speed, 79 attack, 60 HP. Nah, this ain't it. This is a really bad Pokemon. Insomnia, Stake Out. Who are you staking out? Nobody's switching on you. Everybody's staying in and killing you because you're a bug, and you're gonna die. Lokix, on the other hand, actually can threaten somebody because they got 102 attack and 92 speed. This is definitely a Pokemon that could make the team if I decide to in the end, but I still haven't made up my mind. Lokix, though, 92 speed isn't too bad, and 102 for a Route 1 starter bug Pokemon? Like, you're getting out pretty well with that. I wouldn't complain if you were Lokix. And then we look at its abilities. It's got Tinted Lens. So what I think you should do with this Pokemon is just slap a Choice Band on it, and then U-turn. Just the entire battle U-turn. Choice Band U-turn over and over and over again. If it gets knockoff, run knockoff. Maybe it has a signature move as well that you could spam. In fact, let's see what we got for new moves. I think one of them was like, yeah, it's got Axe Kick. That might be this Pokemon. I'm not sure, or it might be Yeah, it might be Axe Kick. If it is Axe Kick, then this may confuse the target. If it misses, the user takes damage instead. It's a recoil move, so maybe it's powerful. In which case, maybe you'd be using that move. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a dark type move. It's hard to say because we don't have enough information at the moment. But I think Tinted Lens on this plus 102 for Bug, like it's not going to be OU or UU or RU, but you know, an NU or PU, maybe could do something. It's not too bad. Okay, Rabsca is the Dung Beetle, and it's got 150 special attack, 100 special defense and 45 speed. Nah. You got like all this defense and nothing to do with it. Bug Psychic is not good defensive typing. Your 45 speed, even if you could set up a Trick Room, 115 is not like a good, strong Trick Room stat. And I was looking at the abilities. The pre-evo got Shed Skin, but then it lost Shed Skin for Telepathy? Why would you give it Telepathy? That's one of the worst abilities in the game, even in doubles. And Synchronize is a really bad ability too. So this Pokemon I just threw under the bus. Like, this is such a bad set of abilities and stats that I have no interest in using this Pokemon at all. Next up we got Houndstone. Houndstone, it's pretty typical for a dog. You got 100 attack, 100 defense, 97 Spadef, and not great HP. But good enough for a ghost. And then if we look at its hidden ability, it's got Fluffy. That's a pretty good ability. Gives you a fire weakness, but that turns that 100 defense into something quite substantial. So you give this thing like Pain Split or something, maybe it could actually be decently tanky in a lower tier. So I'm sort of interested to see what Houndstone can do with that. This Patra, or whatever you want to call it, is a very interesting Pokemon. This is the Ostrich. It gets 100 in its attack and speed, effectively. And it's got 95 HP, but don't worry about that because its stats and defense are trash, so it's not going to be taking any hits. But what it does have is two interesting abilities. It's got Opportunist and it's got Speed Boost. We all know what Speed Boost does. 105 speed and a Speed Boost Pokemon means this Pokemon is going to start off fast and it's only going to get faster. So you don't want it to get set up. If it has any setup moves that boost special attack, this Pokemon could easily get out of control. Although it should die to most forms of priority, so there is that. Opportunist is basically a built-in, I forget what that new item is, but Opportunist says that if you set up, I'm going to set up too. So we look over here. If an opponent's stat is boosted, the Pokemon seizes the opportunity to boost the same stat for itself. So it's like an even more powerful Quiver Dancer ability, right? There was Dancer on Oricorio. This Pokemon does it even better because now it says anything you can do, I'll do it too. And so you can boost all sorts of stuff. Now, on the one hand, there's a problem with this. If I'm against a Garchomp and the Garchomp goes for Sword Stance, I'm a special attacker. I didn't need that Sword Stance boost. That doesn't do anything for me. If I'm against a Corviknight and the Corviknight goes for Iron Defense, well, I have no defense to speak of. I'll take it. I'll appreciate any defense you can give me. But if you're doing something that benefits you, if it doesn't directly benefit me as well, then it really doesn't do much, right? If my opponent is a Belly Drum Azu and it Belly Drums up and I Belly Drum alongside it, well, of course, I'm not actually Belly Drumming, right? I'm just getting the stat boost. But I'm not a physical attacker. So that does me no good and I'm going to die to Aqua Jet. So I think Speed Boost is going to be the more reliable option overall. So probably you're going to be seeing more of that. But in theory, Opportunists could be used against certain Pokemon. I just don't know which ones. Farigiraf is a really... this is what I expected for Farigiraf. It's got the Wordier treatment where I'm going to make you slower, I'm going to give you some more bulk, and buff your attack stat a little bit. That's what I expected for this. So this is not surprising. I wish it would have been more like 70 base speed, but 60, I guess I'll take it. Cudchu Armortail Sapsipper. Cudchu is a new ability that says you eat your berry, and the next turn you eat your berry again. Pretty interesting ability, but it only is interesting if you want to use a berry, and not very many berries have been used in the past. See my previous video on berries, or in the more recent past, right? In Gen 8, how many people were using berries? Not very many. Gen 7, you had super berries, and in previous gens there were some more, but in Gen 8 at least, there were no berries being used. So I don't really see Cudchu being a good option. Then you've got Armortail, which is Dazzling or Queenly Majesty. And that I think actually is decent on it. However, if you think about it, you've got 60 base speed. How many Pokemon are using priority moves on a base 60 speed Pokemon? Not many. If any at all. Like what? I don't even know. Because Doublade and Spiritomb, they'd have Shadow Sneak, and that doesn't affect you at all. And most other Pokemon with like Aqua Jet or Solrock, they're just going to be faster than you. So I don't think that is a particularly strong ability. So I think it's probably going to stick with Sap Sipper. But the threat of Armor Tail is always there, so you don't necessarily want to bank on that, depending on how open the metagame is that you're in. So, 3 interesting abilities. I just think Sap Sipper is going to be the one that ends up being used. Now we got Wiglet and Wugtrio. This is exactly what I knew would happen. After seeing Alolan, Diglett, and Dugtrio, I did not have any hopes for Wugtrio whatsoever. So looking at it, we got 100 attack, 120 speed. Same thing basically as what Diglett and Dugtrio have got. Really frail, 35 HP, and no defenses to speak of whatsoever. So, like, what are you going to do with that? Well, the last thing I would do is give it defensive abilities. Gooey, that's the same as Tingling Hair. You have to get touched in order to slow your opponent's speed. Well, you're already faster than almost all of your opponents, so speed doesn't matter. And you're going to die in the process because you have 35 HP and 50 defense. So it's the same as Tingling Hair on Dugtrio. Wow, I slowed down my opponent. Well, guess what? I'm dead now. So I hope the next Pokemon can now outspeed it. And that's as far as that's going to go. Terrible ability. Then you got Rattled, which, fun to have a Rattled Pokemon that's fully evolved, but I'm a Water type, right? I'm a pure Water type. Rattled affects Ghost, Dark, Bug. All of those are neutral on me with my 35 HP stat. I don't want to be taking any of those hits, and it boosts my speed. I don't need speed. I'm a Dugtrio. Why would I ever need Rattled? Now you've got Sandveil. Sandveil is interesting because I believe you don't take Sand Chip in Sandstorm and you're a Water type, so you can actually use that. Sandveil is probably what you should be running on your Dugtrio, but if you're playing on Smogon, they won't like you using Sandveil, so you're not even going to be able to use that ability. So now you're stuck with Gooey. I don't want to use Gooey on my Dugtrio or my Wugtrio, whatever you want to call it. Oh, this Pokemon is going to be bad. People are also saying Wugtrio is going to be a special attacker. Nope, it's a physical attacker. So it's going to be stuck with Liquidation, and that'll be its only thing. So at least with a Dugtrio and a Alolan Dugtrio, it could spam Earthquake. This Pokemon doesn't even have that. So unless it gets something that's 100 base power or more, this Pokemon is unsalvageable, in my opinion. Dondozo has really good HP stat, decent attack, and good defense, but then everything else is trash. Now this is the Catfish Pokemon, and we're going to see later that the Sushi Pokemon is going to complement these stats, so keep that in the back of your head. Now, in terms of abilities, it's Unaware, Oblivious, Water Veil. Those are pretty typical of sort of dopey looking Catfish or Mudfish Pokemon in Pokemon, so I'm not surprised to see those. They're just not really inspiring, so I'm just going to sort of gloss over this one. Now, we got Veluza, which is that Hake fish Pokemon, and overall, I was actually really disappointed with these stats. 102 attack is meh. 90 HP on a Hakefish? Why? Put 90 in speed instead of 70. 70 and 90 should have been swapped here for sure. And you could have lowered this attack and put more into the attack stat. Really? Like, you're just making this Pokemon bad on purpose. Now, it does get decent abilities. It gets Mold Breaker, which I do love Mold Breaker. I just think you need to have a way to abuse Mold Breaker. Like, Dredagon gets Glare, and Mega Sharpedo can OHKO you through your Sturdy. But this Pokemon doesn't seem strong enough to OHKO things through Sturdy, and I don't really see it as being a status Pokemon, so I don't really think Mold Breaker is going to have too many times where it's going to be useful, except for Water Absorb, and that's about it. So, overall, besides Water Absorb, I don't really think that's that great of a Pokemon to use Mold Breaker for. I would much prefer to use Sharpness. And Sharpness will give you a stat boost if you have appropriate moves, but I don't know what moves it'll get. Psycho Cut, maybe, and then after that, I don't know what it's going to get. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But the problem is that if you're stuck with boosting only a certain type of move, then it's not as good as boosting all your moves. For example, something like Tough Claws versus Iron Fist. Tough Claws boosts all your physical contact moves, whereas Iron Fist only boosts punching moves. So I would much rather have Tough Claws over Iron Fist. And the same holds true here. Sharpness is only going to buff maybe 1 or 2 of your moves. If it doesn't boost all of your moves, then it's going to have limited usefulness in terms of actually giving you that extra buff to your attack stat that you need. And it does need it because it's only 102, which is fantastic. Alright, next up we got the Dolphin, Finizen, and then Palafin. Palafin has sort of this interesting thing going where it turns into a superhero version of itself. So it starts off as just a normal dolphin. In fact, it looks exactly the same as Finizen, except for it's got a heart on its chest. But then what happens is it's got this ability 0 to hero. And if we look at the description for 0 to hero, and this is a big one, the Pokemon transforms into its hero form when it switches out. Now this is interesting. So does that mean that when I switch out once, that for the rest of the battle I will transform to hero form? Because if that's the case, this actually could be a very good Pokemon, and we'll see why now. So Palafin normal has 457. Not great, but it does have 100 base speed. And this 100 base speed could be important. Because for instance, if you give the Dolphin Flip Turn or U-Turn, at least one of those I definitely feel like it's going to have. 100 base speed, U-Turn, Flip Turn, that's enough to get you safely out of harm's way. Then when you come back in, you are now in hero form, and look at what you have. A base stat total of 650. That's above many legendary Pokemon. You've got 100 HP still, which you had before. 160 attack. 97, 87 defenses, which is not bad with 100. 106 attack, which could be useful for like Ice Beam and things like that. And then 100 speed is still there. So now 160, 100. This is a very strong Pokemon all of a sudden, and all it took was switching out once. So if you consider Pokemon like Wishiwashi, Archeops, Regigigas, Slacking, these kinds of Pokemon are hindered by these really bad abilities. If the only bad part about your ability is that you have to switch out one time and then you get to be in hero form for the rest of the battle, well, actually this Pokemon is very, very good. At least on paper. Now we'll have to see what moves it gets. And it is pure water type. It doesn't have a secondary typing, unfortunately. But besides that, I definitely could see it being pretty interesting. I think it gets a signature move, if I'm not mistaken. We have Triple Dive. I'm assuming that's what this is. The user performs a perfectly timed Triple Dive, hitting the target with splashes of water 3 times in a row. Who knows if that's any good at all, but I thought I'd just mention it since I was thinking about it. Alright, we got Arboliva. Arboliva is a weird name, but I still like olives, so we're going to put it on the team. Unfortunately for Arboliva, it's got 39 base speed. A really slow Pokemon. So 125 attack is pretty decent. I think like does Roserade get about this much? Which is what I'm sort of comparing Arboliva to. And 109 Spadef isn't bad, but only has 78 HP, which is not great. And 90 defense, which in combination is pretty meh. And so, like, in terms of your grass type, this falls in line with, in terms of stats, with something like Serena, which is sort of in the ballpark of what I was thinking would be. But that 39 speed is really bad. Like, if you'd have given it 39 to attack, obviously that would have been ideal, but you could have given it the 109 to speed and 125 to special attack, and all of a sudden it would have been really fantastic. Grass normal is also sort of meh, because what does the normal typing give you? And that's something I really want to see, right? Are you going to get Hyper Voice? Are you going to get Tri Attack? Are you going to get anything at all that's a normal type move? Or is the normal type only going to be there for ghosts and otherwise a hindrance? Because that's all I can see it being mostly. Now, the one thing Arboliva does have going for it, and this is a pretty big one, is that it does have the ability Seed Sower, which says that when you get hit by a move, I think it's just any kind of move, right? Let's just double check this so I don't give out bad information. Seed Sower. When the Pokemon is hit by an attack, you get grassy terrain. So yeah, when you get hit by any kind of attack, you set up grassy terrain. So this is sort of like Spit Sand and Sandaconda in Gen 8, where it could set up Sandstorm, but only once it gets hit, which is actually pretty interesting, especially for Suicide Sand, which is one of the things that it was really good at doing in Battle Stadium Single. So if you are a terrain setter, that's always valuable, and especially if there isn't terrain in the game currently. Let's say I wanted to have Unburden on my Sneasler, right? Or if I need grassy terrain for another strat, whatever that happens to be. Well, this is your terrain setter, so you're going to have to deal with it, and that is what it is. Now, later on, if Rillaboom comes back, well, of course, this will take a back seat, but imagine that this falls down to a lower tier. Well, all of a sudden, maybe I can use this with Go-Goat, right? Everybody loves terrain, grassy terrain with Go-Goat, but Tapu Bulu never falls down low enough. Rillaboom never falls down low enough. If this falls down to NU, maybe you could run it with Go-Goat. I don't know, that would be a good strat, but you could try it out. Let me know how it goes. Alright, next up we got Scovillain. Scovillain is actually going to be terrifying. So Grass Fire with Chlorophyll. If you think about, ignore the Moody. Moody's banned, and even if it could run Moody, I think it would still prefer to run Chlorophyll. Grass Fire in Sun gives you the speed that normal Chlorophyll users enjoy, plus you're now powering up your fire moves, which you have Stab on. So this is what Venusaur does currently in Gen 8, but on steroids. Now you have 108 in both of your attacking stats, so you could run a mixed set here, fully invest in your speed, and then have some kind of mixed set here with either of your attacking stats, or just pick your poison, depending on which one you're feeling like, right? Run a Flamethrower or Weather Ball, Solar Beam, Giga Drain, who knows what it gets. The sky's the limit as far as I know on this thing. I don't think I've seen a new move, but it probably gets one. Well, actually, no, it gets Spicy Extract, but that's a doubles thing. It's a status that doesn't really do anything for us in singles, so I'm not worried about that. That's right. But yeah, no, this Pokemon, it could be very scary, especially because it'll get growth probably. So give it growth, fire move, grass move, coverage move, and it gets dual stab, and the fire moves are powered up by Sun. Very interesting. Now we got Bellabolt. Bellabolt gets Electromorphosis, which is like charge, except for you don't get the spit off boost. Now, in gameplay that I've seen, Electromorphosis does charge up for every single hit that you get. So I don't know if that means that I don't think it's stacking, because it stacks up way beyond +6. I think it just tells you every single time that it's charged up, which is really annoying. I don't know if this will be very good though, because if I go into a ground type, I don't care if you have Electromorphosis up to 1000, I'm still a ground type, and you can't touch me with your electric move. If this boosted the power of all moves, then I'd be interested, but it doesn't, so I'm not. So I'm probably going to think Static is better on this. I don't think this Pokemon is going to be very good at all, but that's just, the way cookie crumbles. Revavroom has 119 attack stat, which is pretty decent, and 90 speed, which is serviceable. Besides that, nothing to write home about. Now you are still poison type, so you're 4 times weak to ground, you got to watch out for that. Overcoat on a steel type is sort of weird because in this game, Hail got removed and got replaced by Snow. And Snow, I don't know if that does damage. Maybe it does. But Sandstorm doesn't. So Overcoat is only going to be protecting you from Spore, Rage Powder, things like that. You do get Filter though, which reduces the power of super effective hits on you. So it makes you a little bit tankier, but you are still 4 times weak to ground, and there's no amount of filter that's going to protect you from that. So I don't really know if I like any of its abilities. Now, I guess I won't get into that. The cars that you fight in the game, they don't have these abilities. They have different ones, but that's because they're cheating. But we're not going to talk about that any further because that gets into story spoilers, and I said we wouldn't have any of those. Now, Orthworm is the worm Pokemon, and I really wanted this to be good, but I knew that it was going to have Phalanx Syndrome, where it was just one stage, one typing, not good. And that is indeed what happened. It's Mono Steel, which is not fantastic, but whatever. Like, think about Klinklang. Klinklang is Mono Steel, doesn't do anything. Gets walled out by any bulky water type, any bulky steel type, doesn't get anything done. You got 85 attack, and 60 special attack. So you're not a good attacking Pokemon. You got 145 defense, which is cool, but you don't even have good HP stat to back it up. So I don't really think Orthworm is that good. The only thing that Orthworm has going for it is that it has a really cool Earth Eater ability, which is basically water absorbed for ground type moves. So that takes a weakness the ground type weakness and turns it into an immunity. So don't try to attack Earthworm in the game with a ground type move, because it's going to heal its HP instead of get hurt. So a really cool ability on a really bad Pokemon, unfortunately. Now I got Mousehold. Mousehold has 111 speed and nothing else going for it. So this Pokemon is trash. Now there was some speculation this would get Parental Bond, but it did not. Friend Guard, which is a cool doubles ability, but I think Clefairy still might do it better. And Cheek Pouch, which I don't really feel like is ever really good except for on maybe Greedent. And Technician is probably what it will run in singles, but I don't know what it's going to get to abuse that. I guess that we'll have to see in a bit. Now we've got Satitan. Satitan is interesting because it has Slush Rush and Sheer Force. I don't think you're ever going to run Thick Fat. But Slush Rush on a slow Pokemon isn't really great, but it's actually not that slow. 73 speed is not the worst when it comes to Slush Rush. However, you are still mono ice, and when I have a hail team or a snow team now, you have to ask, what am I bringing to the team that's different, right? If I'm on the bomb of snow, I can use grass type moves. If I'm an Aurorus, I can use fairy type moves. If I'm a Alolan Sandslash, I can use my steel moves. What can you use as the Titan? You're pure ice. Everybody else on the team is already ice because hail or snow only helps ice types, as opposed to a sun team, which has multiple typings that it can help, right? Or a sandstorm team, which can have multiple types that helps. This only helps ice types. So a mono ice Pokemon isn't going to do very well as a Slush Rusher, in my opinion. But maybe it'll get something that could change my opinion on that. It does have serviceable speed, which is the main concern I had going into this, but it does work. Otherwise, it has Sheer Force, which actually isn't too bad because you've got Icicle Crash, and that will be boosted by Sheer Force. So hey, maybe that'll do something. Give it Liquidation, Sheer Force, Icicle Crash, and then a couple other coverage moves. Alright. Next up we got Baxcalibur. That's our pseudo legendary. Base 600 here. 115 HP, so it's a little bit tanky. And 145 attack is very good. But then it's only got 87 speed, which is really slow. Like, it's not Gudra slow. But this is not great. It's lower than base 90s, and you really don't want to have that problem. Now let's quickly talk about Dragonite. Dragonite was what the big problem was on Kyurem. But Kyurem had the ability Pressure plus heavy duty boots, right? And it also had Roost, and Roost is really the big one. I guess it's one of the big ones, right? Whereas I don't think this Pokemon is going to have Roost, so it's not going to be really tanky and be able to live all your hits and stall you out. Also, Kyurem had Earth Power and Freeze Dry and Focus Blast. Now this Pokemon might get close combat, maybe, but it won't get Freeze Dry, or even if it does, it only has 75 base special attack. So I don't think it'll have the same kind of breaking potential that Kyurem had, but that remains to be seen. Now, I will say that it could have Dragon Dance, and if it has Dragon Dance, then a +1 to base 87 all of a sudden isn't too shabby, and a +1 to 145 attack, now we're Haxorus power. And that is very scary, especially because Corviknight, which might normally wall you, you are an Ice type, that's going to do neutral damage to Corviknight, and Corviknight probably can't eat that very well. So it does have to watch out for that. And if you get like Earthquake on this, then Toxapex is going to be having a bad day. So I think that this could be scary depending on how it gets in terms of moves. Now it has an ability called Thermal Exchange, which is actually a really interesting, compelling ability. Thermal Exchange says that if I get hit by a fire type move, I still take damage, but it boosts my attack stat and I can't get burned. So you're going to take a neutral hit because you're Dragon Ice, but in exchange for taking that damage, you will get an attack buff, which, 145 attack stat, that's what you want. It's going to be very powerful if you get hit by that, and you can't get burned. So normally, if I go for Flamethrower, or if my opponent goes for Flamethrower, and I'm like, oh, I want to go in and get an attack raise. Well, if I got burned with that 10% chance, I'd be super mad. Like, I can't believe it. I switched in and my opponent gets that 10% burn, and now my Pokemon's burned, and now it's not good anymore. Well, this says that you don't have to worry about that. Switch it into the fire type move and reap the benefits. So that's really good. I don't know how that works with Will-O-Wisp, but everything else, at least, I am assuming it'll work with. And so that's actually not too bad. And if it gets Dragon Dance, I think that'll mitigate the low speed. And so it could be very scary. Next up, we got the Tatsugiri forms. This is the Sushi. It's got 3 different forms. I guess it only has 3, so I guess we did see them all before. It's got not great speed stat, but it has a really good special attack stat, or at least a decent one. The problem with it is that it's Dragon Water, which isn't bad, but then let's look at its abilities. Commander is an ability that only does anything in doubles. When the Pokemon enters the field, it goes inside of the mouth of an allied Dondozo if one is on the field. The Pokemon then issues commands from there. So unless you're using this in doubles, this doesn't do anything at all. And even in doubles, you'd have to use the Water-type Dondozo along with the Water Dragon type Tatsugiri. So you have to use 2 water types on the field at the same time. And it's a little bit unclear as to what this commander ability does, if it protects the Tatsugiri and the Dondozo is the one that takes all damage on the field. We're unclear on that point. But, at least in singles, what is clear is that Tatsugiri has no ability. Okay, well, let's look at its hidden ability, because it does get one. It's Storm Drain. Well, what does Storm Drain do? It gives you a +1 to special attack and an immunity to water. Well, I didn't need the immunity to water. I already 4 times resisted it. I mean, I'll take an immunity. That's nice. But I don't think most people are going to use a water type move on my water dragon type. So, at best, that's situational. And so I feel like this Pokemon is not going to have an ability, 82 base speed, and I don't think this Pokemon is going to be very good at all. Look at its defense, right? And its HP stat. Very frail, not very fast, and only moderately powerful. So I don't think this Pokemon is going to get very far. Cyclizar is interesting because 95 attack is pretty mediocre, 85 base special attack is even worse. This is like Flygon levels. 121 speed is actually pretty decent. We do remember, though, that it has the Shed Tail move, and if you look at its hidden ability, it did in fact get Regenerator. People were speculating if it got Regenerator, then Shed Tail would be a lot better, and it does in fact get Regenerator. So I believe that you will always see Regenerator on this Pokemon, and it will be purely there to baton pass substitutes to its allies. And if that gets banned, then Cyclizar will fall down to probably Enyu. I would have to say this is like Enyu power levels. But if it doesn't get banned, then it could probably work in just about any tier that it's in, provided that the ability to get a free substitute is appealing to people. Alright. Pawmot. Pawmot gets 115, 105, which for a Pika clone isn't too bad. Electric Fighting. It gets Volt Absorb, which, is pretty standard for a lot of electric types. Natural Cure, which is nice if you get burned, but otherwise is pretty situational. And Iron Fist. It remains to be seen what moves it gets. I know it gets Arm Thrust. I think that might work with Iron Fist, but if it gets Iron Fist, it needs to have moves that can use Iron Fist. So Drain Punch. I think Plasma Fists might be one, but that's a signature move, so it depends on what moves it gets. Otherwise, these are pretty mid abilities, and I don't think that Pawmot is going to be that great, except for its move. And I guess we will briefly cover that. So this has been known for some time now, but we haven't talked about it because I haven't been talking about spoilers outside of spoiler videos. But Pawmot does get a really important move. Where did it go? Revival Blessing. The user bestows a loving blessing, reviving a party Pokemon that is fainted and restoring half that Pokemon's max HP. So in a move, revive. Wow. Huge for competitive Pokemon. However, that being said, you have to use Pawmot on your team. And Pawmot's only a mid Pokemon at best. So, you take it with a grain of salt. And I believe this only has one PP, so you can only do it one time. But in lower tiers, where Pawmot might be a little more competitive, this could actually be pretty annoying. And then again, if this Pokemon dies before the rest of your Pokemon, then you don't even get to use that move. So it may not even be worth the trouble. It just depends on the metagame that develops eventually. Alright, Kilowattrel. Kilowattrel is that Pokemon that I don't think that looks like one, but that being said, even though I'm going to hate on its design a little bit, I'm not going to hate on what they did for it. So this is a regional bird, right? Now, some regional birds have been pretty good, especially Corviknight, and then to a lesser extent, Talonflame. So for every Corviknight and Talonflame, then I guess Staraptor maybe, you have a Noctowl or a Toucannon, and they're just bad. Like, there's no two ways about it, these Pokemon are not good. The Kilowattrel, I don't think is one of those. At least in terms of, like, regional birds. It's not a good Pokemon, but it's not bad. You got 125 base speed right off the bat. 125 base speed is mega fast, especially in lower tiers, right? This is faster than Starmie. This is faster than Sneasel. Like, you're fast at 125 base speed. 105 special attack isn't great, but as you know, opposed to a lot of the Pokemon we've seen before, 105 isn't bad either. We'll take it. And you've got 3 interesting abilities. So Wind Power says that there are certain moves that we're going to classify as wind moves. This can be everything from Hurricane, Air Cutter, Tailwind. These are all moves that are going to be wind moves, sort of like punching moves, ballistic moves, or sound moves. And so if it gets hit by one, it's going to boost its, which one is it? Attack? Wind Power. Wind Power here says you get, it charges electric type move. So it only charges your electric type move. So it's not terribly great, but if you were going to use an electric type move, now that's not bad. And if you get hit by a wind type move, it's probably a flying type move. So boosting your electric attack would be pretty good, you would think, against a flying type that uses a flying type move on you. You are an electric type yourself, so you do resist those moves. So not the end of the world. And I do think I saw it have Tailwind used on it, like somehow either on itself or in doubles. And if by itself Tailwind does that, then this could be interesting in terms of I set up a Tailwind, I power up my electric move, I Volt Switch out. If that's how that works, that could be sort of interesting. But we'll have to see. Next up, you got Volt Absorb. Volt Absorb isn't bad on an electric flying type. Like, I will take that, especially in a normal gameplay. Volt Absorb, not bad. And then you got Competitive, and Competitive isn't too shabby of an ability, right? You turn in that 105 special attack into something pretty serviceable if you get an Intimidate drop or anything like that. So, 3 interesting abilities. In terms of regional birds, it's definitely not a Corviknight, but it's definitely not a Toucannon either. So I'd say this is probably going to be good. On the other hand, this next bird, maybe not so much. Bombardier is the Historic Pokemon, 103 attack, which is on that same level. But if that's all you've got going for you, then it's not that great. And as we can see, that's all it has going for it. It has mixed defense, but not fantastic, and then 82 speed, which is not great. And your Flying Dark type, which is pretty mid. Like, of course, it's extremely good when it's extremely good, like on his Beltall, which is the best Pokemon ever. But on Honchkrow, for instance, it doesn't really do offensively any favors. So it only is really good defensively if you can make it work, but this is clearly not a defensive Pokemon. Now you get Big Pex, which is not a good ability, Kenai, which is not a good ability, and then Rocky Payload, which is a new ability for this Pokemon. And this boosts the power of your rock type moves. So assuming this is like Steely Spirit or whatever it is for the Anchor Pokemon, then it should be a 1.5 boost. Basically just stab on rock type moves is what I'm assuming this is. Now, interestingly, what are you going to get? Rock Slide. Maybe something else is a rock type move, I don't know. But what are you? You're a Flying Dark type. Does Flying Dark care about rock coverage? Let's think about this. So if I'm a flying type, I struggle with electric types. I struggle with rock and steel types. None of those care about rock moves, and the rock and steel are going to resist it, so that doesn't help me at all. I'm a dark type. What do I struggle with? I struggle with fighting types. Those resist rock moves. I struggle with fairy types. They don't care about rock moves. So what does having rock coverage get me? I hit fire types, which I hit neutrally anyway with my other moves. So that's about it. So having extra stab is always okay, but it's not really that great, I don't think. I think it's just a meh ability, and that's the best case scenario. And you don't even get that in-game. It's a hidden ability. So that's sort of unfortunate. But, maybe you could terrestrialize it into a rock type, get the rocky payload boost, and all of a sudden, you got something going. But even then, you wouldn't get the super stab. You would just get normal stab on rock plus rocky payload. I would much have preferred to have had something that boosted dark type plus darker. So, I don't know. Bombardier is a weird Pokemon. I thought it sort of was a fun design, but looking at its stuff here, I'm not too enthused by it. Maybe later down the line I'll change my tune. Next up, I know I won't change my tune on this. Squawkabilly. These parrots, macaws, whatever they are, they're trash. Really bad. 92 speed is the best stat. Not even, I guess 96 attack is technically their best stat. But 96 speed, or 92 speed, 96 attack, those are really bad. And those are the best things you've got going for it. Everything else is like really terrible. These Pokemon are going to die in one hit. They're going to get outsped by tons of Pokemon. They're not going to hit very hard at all. I believe they were only put in the game to, one, add some kind of form Pokemon with different colors, because they like doing that, right, with like Minior and Vivian, things like that more recently. And also to maybe like make the flying taxi work or something. I don't know why they made this Pokemon. But it's not a good Pokemon. It's probably worse than Chatot. Now it gets Intimidate, which is somewhat useful, but not on a Pokemon that dies to any one hit. Hustle, which is not a good ability to have to rely on. So I wouldn't say, 96, but it's got Hustle. No, it's 96 and it has to use Hustle. And then as a hidden ability, it's actually interesting. 2 of them get Guts and 2 of them get Sheer Force. So based on the color, you can actually tell which ones are allowed to have Guts and which ones are allowed to have Sheer Force. It should be pretty obvious as to which one they'll run, based off of if you see a Flame Orb or not. But, the Sheer Force will only be good if they have moves to abuse Sheer Force. But if they're using Brave Bird, U-Turn, Knockoff, Sheer Force probably isn't good at all. And not if they get those moves at all. Who even knows what they get. And then Guts is probably what they're going to have to run, which is just such a terrible ability to have to run as a flying type, that I just feel like this is just going to be bottom of the ZU tier. It's going to be very bad. Flamigo is a flying type, however. It's going to be pretty meh. It's not going to be good, but it's not going to be bad either. It's got 115 attack, which isn't awful, and 90 speed, which is pretty mid. But it also, you have to consider where Flamingo is caught. It's an early route bird. Like, I've seen it caught at like level 6. So to have a Pokemon with those stats caught at level 6? Like, what? So if you need a Pokemon to carry you through early game, I think Flamigo is your amigo. It's got Scrappy, which means they can't get intimidated. And it's got Tingled Feet, which is a fun ability, but it's not a really good ability. So I think Scrappy would be the better of the 2 abilities. Finally, it's got Co-Star, which is a new ability. But if we look at Co-Star, we'll notice that it's only it's a doubles move, or it's a doubles mechanic. Co-Star says that when the Pokemon enters the battle, it copies an ally's stat changes. So this is good if your ally is already set up, but if it's not, then why would you ever use Flamigo? And even if it is, then, I mean, that implies that your ally, the guy that Flamigo is replacing, died or something. So maybe you can make it work in doubles, but in singles is not going to see any use at all. So I think you don't want to stick with Scrappy on Flamigo. At the end of the day is what I'm trying to say. Now, I don't think this is going to be a good Pokemon at the end of the game, and I don't think it's going to be a very good Pokemon in competitive, but it definitely is a good early game Pokemon. I'll give it that. Cloth is meh. It does have Anger Shell, which is that free Shell Smash, or free mini Shell Smash, but it only happens once when you get below 50% HP. It gets Shell Armor, which is great, whatever. It gets Regenerator, which I actually don't think it's going to run. I don't think this is the kind of Pokemon that wants to run Regenerator. Pure Rock is not good defensive typing. You're not going to get a recovery move, probably. I don't think Regenerator is really going to be good on this. And you don't really have that great defensive either, right? 70 HP, 55 SPDF, not good. 100 attack, 115, 75. They're pretty meh attack stats, but if you consider the fact that this probably gets Shell Smash plus Anger Shell, I think that this moderate stat distribution actually works out in the end in terms of game balance, because if it ends up with +3 to all of these stats, it could actually be pretty scary. So, Cloth, I don't think it's going to be OU. I think it's going to be like an NU, PU Pokemon. But it could definitely be scary when it's brought to a game. Probably PU. Alright, let's look at the Salt. Garganackle. 100, 100, 130, 90. This is like Hippowdon levels of bulk. Maybe not quite that much. I don't know exactly what Hippowdon has off the top of my head, but this is pretty dang bulky. 35 speed, who even cares about that? Now you're a pure rock type, unfortunately. But you have two good abilities. You got Purifying Salt and Sturdy. So we know what Sturdy does. Purifying Salt says that you can't be status, and it halves the damage done from ghost type moves. Wow. So now you resist ghost, and you can't be toxic, you can't be paralyzed, you can't be frozen, you can't be put to sleep. That is amazing for this Pokemon. Like, I don't know if it'll get a recovery move or what it's going to get, but Garganackle actually isn't too bad in my opinion. I am sort of liking Garganackle a lot. That being said, it is a pure rock type, and that does have significant drawbacks, like the fact that you don't have a safe move to spam like Earthquake. You have to like Rock Slide, Rock Blast, Stone Edge. Those aren't safe moves, right? And you are very slow. If you don't get recovery, then you're not going to be a good wall. If you don't get really good coverage options, then you set up Stealth Rock, you click Toxic, you click Rock Blast and Earthquake like Gigalith, right? And Gigalith is okay, but Gigalith only became even good when it got Sandstorm, but before that it wasn't good at all. And this does not have Sandstorm, it doesn't have it as an ability, right? So I don't think that it'll be particularly good unless it gets the things it needs. I think it needs recovery, and I think it needs good coverage, but we'll see. Alright, next up we've got Glamora. And Glamora is that weird flower, the blue flower thing. And it has an interesting stat distribution where it's got defenses, it's got 86 speed, which is like that really awkward speed tier where I can't say you're fast, but you're definitely faster than everything that's slow. And then you have 130 Spatak, which is actually not too bad. Glamed actually has 105 Spatak, which is really good for Little Cub. But you got Glamora with 130, which isn't too bad. You're Rock Poison, so this is Nihilego typing. And Toxic Debris and Corrosion. So this is a Pokemon that's going to come out and it's going to poison things. Toxic Debris says when you get hit, you set up a layer of Toxic Spikes. So that's really great right off the bat, right? Free Toxic Spikes for getting hit? Hey, we'll take it. You bring it in on a weak hit, all of a sudden you got Toxic Spikes up for free. Corrosion, of course, everybody knows how annoying that is on Salazzle. But I gotta say, there's a big difference between being a Rock Poison and being a Fire Poison. Rock Poison is hard beaten by Steel, because Steel resists everything you can do. So you can corrode me all you want, but you're still gonna have to switch hard. Now Salazzle, I guess technically would in certain scenarios, but also Salazzle had fire moves for Steels, so you couldn't stay in with that. And Rock Poison doesn't beat opposing poison types necessarily either, so it's not like it has that over Salazzle. Overall, I don't think that this Pokemon wants to run Corrosion so much. So probably wants to run more Toxic Debris, but at a certain point, 2 layers of Toxic Spikes is all you can get. So it's not like you're getting unlimited viability out of that ability. I think this is a pretty mediocre Pokemon. I don't really see it being an OU threat, or even a UU one, but I could see it being RU or maybe even RUBL. But that's just me. That's my guess. Alright, Graphite. I don't know why this Pokemon had to have a pre-evo, but it does have one. As a Pokemon standalone, I'm actually surprised at 485. I thought it would have been a little bit lower on the EST. But also, they did give it 95 attack and 80 Spatak. I think they could have maybe given it like 60 Spatak, and then it would have been lower and just as the same. It's pretty weak defensively. It's got 110 speed, which is quite good, and 95 attack for a ZU Pokemon probably isn't too bad. But ultimately, I don't think that Graphite is going to be anything above like ZU or PU. Poison Normal doesn't really give you too much. And as a trickster kind of Pokemon, it's going to have a lot of annoying moves, but that's about all it's going to have is annoying moves. And if everything is just trying to finish battles in like 10 turns because Stall has been reduced to Shambles in this new generation, then I don't really know how useful it'll be. You get Unburden, but you didn't need Unburden because 110 speed, you're really fast. Poison Touch, which is sort of annoying, especially if you're going to U-turn out and just poison everything. Then you got Prankster, which, despite the Prankster nerf, I think could still be somewhat useful. But that remains to be seen. Next up, we got Darkspun. Now, Darkspun had that really cool thing where it started off doughy and then it got sort of brown as it got cooked. Well, it has an ability to back that up called Well-Baked Body. And if we looked at Well-Baked Body, it says that this Pokemon, where did it go? Well-Baked Body. This Pokemon takes no damage when hit by Fire-type moves. Instead, its defense stat is sharply raised. So if I have a Darkspun on my team, in theory, I can't, if my opponent has one, I can't use Fire-type moves, because if I do, I'll boost his defense. That'll be scary. The problem is, what typing is Darkspun? It's a Fairy type. What typing resists Fairy? Well, it's Fire. So if I'm a Fire type, I use a Fire move, Darkspun comes in, gets a defense raise, I can just use any other move, and the Darkspun can't touch me. What are you going to play rough me? So it better have something for those Fire types, otherwise, I don't really see that being particularly useful. That's just me though. Like maybe eventually we'll see not as Earthquake and Rock Slide and other things that can scare out flying fire types. But let's think about this in OU. If I had Darkspun in OU, which is definitely not going to be OU, but if I had it, well, I come in on a Heatran. Heatran just uses Flash Cannon. Now I'm dead. Well, what about NU? NU seems more like it's cup of tea. Well, okay, maybe there's bulky Talonflame. We know Talonflame is back in the game. And if Talonflame falls down that far, it could run the same bulky set as it runs from Gen 8. Well, it has Will-O-Wisp and it has Flare Blitz. I bring it on one of those. Maybe I can live a Brave Bird now, right? Well, that's cool. What am I doing to Talonflame? Do I have Wild Charge? I don't know what I'm supposed to do to it. Right? And that's the question that I have to have answered. Because I do think Darkspun is sort of a cool Pokemon, but I do want that question answered. What is a Fairy type supposed to do to a Fire type? If it can do something, then we have something to talk about. That also being said, it only has 80 attack, and so unless you have Body Press, then you're not doing any damage. So I don't have high hopes for this Pokemon. Now, Mabostiff is more interesting for me. You have 120 attack, which is respectable, 85 speed, which is serviceable, and you have 3 interesting abilities. You have Intimidate, Guard Dog, and Stakeout. Now, Intimidate, we all know that does. And you have meh defenses, but at least it's something. I don't know. Stakeout, I think, is one that's pretty decent because 120 attack and 85 speed, you'll be outspeeding a decent number of Pokemon, and you do have a decent attack stat, so you could be scaring out certain Pokemon as opposed to the Spider Pokemon from earlier, right? Spidops or whatever it was called. That Pokemon isn't scaring out anything, so Stakeout doesn't do anything for it. If this Mabostiff Pokemon can scare stuff out, well, then that means that Stakeout could work for it. So therein lies the difference. Guard Dog is an interesting ability that says you get boost to your attack stat if you're intimidated. So basically it's like a Defiant for Intimidate only. So don't bring in an Intimidate Pokemon because I'll get an attack raise. That's pretty good. Then also, moves and items that would force the Pokemon to switch out also fail to work, which means you can't be Whirlwinded, you can't be Eject Buttoned, or Red Carded. That's actually not too bad. Like, I don't know if that's what you'd want to run, but if there's an Intimidate Pokemon that's annoying the tier, then yeah, no, I think that is not a bad ability by any stretch of the imagination. So I think this is actually probably the dog I like the best out of all the dogs. Next up, we've got Bramblegast. It's got a high speed stat of 90. Now, I think that speed ties the small Gourgeist, if I'm not mistaken. But every other ghost grass type is really slow, right? You got the Anchor, you got the Owl, you got the Tree, and you got all the other pumpkins that aren't the small Gourgeist. And they're all really slow. And if you want to distinguish yourself, you're going to have to do something different. And Bramblegast is doing something different. It's got 90 base speed, got 115 attack, which isn't too bad. And it's got some interesting abilities. Infiltrator, I think, is the one you'd want to run. But it does have Wind Rider. Now, Wind Rider let's go back over here. It says it has it boosts its attack stat if Tailwind takes effect or if the Pokemon is hit by a wind move and you take no damage from wind moves. So you're immune to Hurricane, you're immune to Air Cutter or any of the other moves. We're not sure exactly which ones fall into the category, so I don't want to say too much more than that, but let's just pretend Hurricane at the very least, right? So you have an immunity to some flying type moves. As a grass type, you're going to really appreciate that. Now, I don't know if Bramblegast gets Tailwind itself. If it gets Tailwind itself, then that could be pretty cool. Because then you get a +2 to your speed from Tailwind, plus an attack raise. And that actually wouldn't be too bad as another Tailwind setter. In doubles, I think this could be a really cool support Pokemon in that regard as well, because you'd be a support Pokemon setting up Tailwind, plus you'd be becoming a bigger threat yourself. And I think that's what they were going for here. But I think in singles, unless you want to set up Tailwind, if it can, I don't even know if it can, but unless it can, then I think that you'll probably want to run Infiltrator, because how many wind Pokemon or wind moves are there? If there aren't that many, you'd rather just have something consistent. I think Infiltrator is more consistent, but that remains to be seen. Now we've got Golden Go. That's the evolution to Gimmighoul that looks like Gumby. And this Pokemon is a mixed bag. You look at its stats, it's got 133 special attack, quite good. 84 speed, which is passable. And then 90, 90, 87, so like all 90s for its defenses. It's meh. It's pretty mediocre. Nothing that it specializes in. But then we look at its ability, Good as Gold. Good as Gold says that it has full immunity to other Pokemon's status moves. So that doesn't mean it can't get status, because Scald can still burn it. But what it does mean is that it can't be Will-O-Wisp, can't be Toxic anyway, because it's a Steel type, but it can't be Toxic from Corrosion. And it also can't be Whirlwinded, can't be Taunted, it can't be Rage Powdered. This is actually really not bad as an ability, because it just does what it's going to do. You know, there's so many Pokemon whose ability never come into play, but there are so many status moves being used in Pokemon, and this says that other Pokemon's status moves have no effect on me. I will say though, that I believe that may mean your allies can't help you out either. So if that's the case, then you know you can't use Decorate on All Creamy on this, or what have you, right? You can't use Coaching in doubles. So you have to watch out for that. I don't know how that's going to work, but just keep that in the back of your head. Alright, I'm going to skip the Paradox Pokemon because I don't really have anything to say on that point at this time. The Paradox Pokemon have crazy stats. Crazy stats. They're all really busted Pokemon with a couple of exceptions. And I want to know more about how this is going to work before I say too much about it. I will say, though, that Photosynthesis is basically Chlorophyll, except for it boosts whichever stat is best for you. And Quark Drive is basically like in Electric Terrain. It does the same thing where it boosts your highest stat. So that means that with these Pokemon being so powerful, I think that going forward, we're either going to need to ban Electric Terrain and Sun in general in OU, or we ban the Paradox Pokemon in OU, because looking at their stats, they need to be banned from OU, most of them anyway. So I think that, frankly, that would be the safer option. Or we need to make it so that you're not allowed to use Sun or Terrain on the same team with the Paradox Pokemon. Something needs to be done, because these Pokemon could really destroy OU because they're just so busted. But that's something that really I have no clue how that's going to go in the future, so I'm just going to skip it. Next up, we've got the Legendary Quartet. We've got Tinglu, who is a dark ground. So going back to this image over here, Tinglu is this one here. It's not a very good image. I think if we go over to here, you can see a better picture of what they look like. The Tinglu looks like this. I don't really know what the heck that's supposed to be, but it's got crocodile typing, dark ground, so that's pretty good. It's very slow though, which is really weird to me because Wo-Chien, which is the snail, has 70 speed. How does the snail go faster than the whatever the heck this is? I don't understand that. And then we've got Chen Pao, which is very threatening, right? It's got 135 speed, 130 attack. Like that's a powerful Pokemon. Dark Ice, that's Weavile typing, and you're faster than Weavile. Like, this is going to be one to watch out for, I think. And then you got Chi-Yu, which is the goldfish. And this is the one that I think is the most fun looking. So I'm most excited for Chi-Yu. And it's a Dark Fire, which is Incineroar typing. So pretty good typing. 100 speed, 145 special attack. I'm all about the special attackers with the fast speed stat. So this is the one I want to use. And besides that stat line, I also just like its design the best. The other ones, I don't know what the heck they were going for, but this is just the goldfish with swirly eyes. So I'm okay with that. Let's look at Koraidon and Miraidon. The Koraidon and Miraidon have multiple forms here. Don't worry about that. They're all exactly the same. It just depends on how far you progressed along in the story. Now, we look at this. 135 speed on all of them means that a lot of what Ubers is going to come down to is speed ties between these two, which I can't say I particularly enjoy, but that's basically how it was with Groudon and Kyogre, so it's going to be, more of the same as what we've had in the past. Now we see that they also basically have the same exact stat distribution, except for one's a physical attacker and one's a special attacker, and their defenses mirror that as well. So they are stronger than Xerneas and Yveltal, who have 131 in their stats. And you can say, well, Xerneas and Yveltal, they have abilities that boost their moves. Well, guess what? These guys do too. So Koraidon has a crazy busted ability called Orichalcum Pulse, and what that does is it gives you Drought plus an attack boost, just like Intrepid Sword does. And Miraidon gives you Hadron Engine, which gives you Electric Terrain plus a special attack boost, just like Intrepid Sword would if it were a special attack one. So that means that you are now stronger than Yveltal or Xerneas just because you got an attack boost. Now, an unaware Pokemon could come in and make that no longer true. But, technically, if you want to play that game, then Zygarde could come in and or break you, and then that wouldn't be true again. So, at the end of the day, these guys looking extremely threatening, both of them in their own right, and I don't know which one is going to be stronger. I'm also interested to see how Orichalcum Pulse and Hadron Engine work in terms of resetting. So one thing that, if we look at this ability, where is it? Hadron Engine, just as an example, turns the ground into electric terrain when the Pokemon enters the battle. Great, we understand that part. The futuristic engine within the Pokemon also boosts its special attack stat on electric terrain. So, what does that mean? That could mean a few things. One, that means that you only get the boost when you're in electric terrain, which I guess is less busted because if the terrain goes away, then you lose your boost. Or it means that you get a visible stat buff when the electric terrain goes up. And then if somebody were to set grassy terrain and then to reset electric terrain, then you would get another special attack, and now you'd be a +2. If that's how that goes, then that's pretty nutty. But it could also be that you only get the boost if you're in electric terrain, which I'm hoping is more the case, because then I could just bring out like Rillaboom or Tapu Fini or whatever, and then that benefit would be gone, and then you would not have an ability effectively. And that would be a little bit less busted. So we'll have to see how that goes. Finally, we've got some random Pokemon here at the bottom. We've got the Hammer Pokemon, which you may have forgotten about by now. But Tinkaton is a very interesting Pokemon. Has a really strong 160 base power move, but then also at the same time has 75 attack. What? 75 attack? Now, you think, well, maybe it has huge power to make up for it. It's holding that huge hammer, right? No, it doesn't. It gets Mold Breaker, Own Tempo, and Pickpocket. None of those are particularly strong. So people were talking about this Steel Fairy like it's going to be super busted. And it still may be. I don't know, but I don't think so. Because even though it has that really powerful move, it can't click it twice in a row. And it doesn't have any abilities here that really break the game wide open. I feel like this is a pretty mid Pokemon. Mid speed, nice Spadef, and that's about it. So that's pretty Let's talk about Armarouge and Ceruledge. These Pokemon were heavily marketed, and people think they look really cool. I think they look pretty decent, but they're not very good. 85 speed on Ceruledge, and that's the better of the two in terms of speed. And that's like just barely faster than Gallade and Gardevoir. And more to Ceruledge's point, it's just 5 points faster than Chandelure. And we were saying when we used Chandelure in the previous video that it doesn't really have that great of a speed stat for its typing. And so Ceruledge is, its speed stat is okay, but it's not great. 125 attack is okay as well. But let's look at its abilities. It's got Flash Fire and Weak Armor. And the same holds true for Armarouge, which has a little bit less speed, but a little more bulk. I think Ceruledge comes out on top in terms of that, just because you want the speed, I think. But these are pretty bad abilities. Like Flash Fire, what's to do with that? Like technically, the one thing Flash Fire does for you is that it does give you power up to your fire moves. So if you were saying, well, I want to get more powerful Pokemon, well, this does give you a power boost, but only if you get hit by a fire type move, which isn't going to happen necessarily if your opponent knows that you want to go into that Pokemon. So it's going to be hard to activate Flash Fire. And on a Pokemon like Heatran, Flash Fire is useful because it gives you an immunity to what otherwise would be a neutral hit. But this Pokemon does not have a neutral hit with fire. It's going to resist fire, so it doesn't need that help. And then Flash Fire is the only ability you can get normally. Flame Body, or not Flame Body, that's on Charcadet. Weak Armor on the other two Pokemon is not really that great. Weak Armor does mitigate the lower speed stat, but it also means you have to get hit. And maybe on Armarouge that could be more of a thing, but on Ceruledge, probably much less of a thing. You don't want to get hit on Ceruledge because it's pretty frail. And then, in which case, you're going to just probably run Flash Fire. I don't think these Pokemon are going to be very strong, personally, unless they have a really busted move. Or move pool at the very least. And they can run like a good choice Scarf set. And that's the only case they have any hope, I think. Next up, we got Toedscruel. Toedscruel is 100 speed. This is a mushroom Pokemon with 100 speed. This is not a drill. Now, let's think about what mushroom Pokemon get. Mushroom Pokemon get one specific move. They get Spore. Spore is 100% accuracy, sleep move. Now, sleep has been confirmed to return to the game, just as it was before. So I'm not dealing with drowsy, this is full-on sleep. So Spore is a very powerful move. Now, what did Game Freak do for this? They gave us a new ability, Mycelium Might, and it is the only ability Tentacruel is allowed to learn. And I can tell you right now that if Tentacruel didn't have to learn Mycelium Might, it would not want it. Because Mycelium Might can be good, it's also really bad for it. Mycelium Might, right at the bottom of the page. The Pokemon will always act more slowly when using status moves, but these moves will be unimpeded by the ability of the target. What does this mean? This means that in its speed bracket, I believe, is what it's going to be, that Tentacruel will go last. I still think it'll go in before things like Roar, if I'm not mistaken. But that's unconfirmed. But Spore cannot be fast. It will have to be slow. So even though it has 100 speed, you can't have 100 speed Spore. That would be really annoying in competitive, especially in VGC or in Battle Stadium singles where they don't have Sleep Claws. So I think they looked at that and said, we need to slow down Tentacruel somehow. So Tentacruel has a very good speed stat from the base, like the base Tentacruel. So I imagine they looked at that and said, hey, we're going to make Tentacruel into a mushroom. Cool. It needs to get Spore. Oh snap. That's going to be really busted to give it really fast Spore. Let's give it an ability that makes it so it has to be slow Spore. But we have to make it cool. So what we're going to do is it's going to be unimpeded by the ability of the target. Meaning, if it's Magic Bounce, I don't care. So if this thing gets Toxic, Spore, Toxic Spikes, things like that, I don't care about what you have. I'm getting it off. So it's like Mold Breaker only for Magic Bounce. And maybe Overcoat as well. So this could Spore a Escavalier, for example. So it has a couple of use cases that aren't bad, but I think I would just rather have Mold Breaker. But I think the reason they did that was because this is going to be a very fast Spore otherwise. Alright, getting to the end of the list. King Gambit. This is the Bisharp evolution. It's slower. That's what people expected. 135 attack is a little bit stronger, and then it's got much more bulk. So overall, I don't really know if this is going to be better than Eviolite Bisharp, but it did create Eviolite Bisharp, so at the very least we got that. Now it has a new ability called Supreme Overlord. It does keep Defiant, which is good because I think Defiant will still be good on it, but you get Supreme Overlord, and if we can find that one, when the Pokemon enters a battle, its attack and special attack are slightly boosted for each of the allies in its party that have already been defeated. So let's say that I have 3 Pokemon defeated. How much is a slight boost? Let's say it's a 1.1 boost and a 1.2 and a 1.3 and 1.4. So you can get up to a 1.5 boost by the end of the battle if you're the last Pokemon remaining. If that's the case, that's not too bad. It's not great at the end of the day, but it's not too bad. And so if you have to play a Sucker Punch game at the end of the game, you have a very good chance, even without a Swords Dance boost, of killing your opponent with a 1.5 boost. I don't know how I like that compared to Defiant, but it is something to play around with. So it's sort of cute. Next up, we got Clodsire, and we look at Clodsire. It's got 130 HP, big HP stat, big SpDef stat as well. A pretty low defensive stat, honestly, which is a little bit disappointing. But with 130 HP, you can make that work. 20 base speed though, so this boy is going last. And you don't really have great attack stat either. 75 is pretty mid, so it's not like this is a Trickroom attack or anything. I sort of wish, to be honest, that this had been flipped so it could have run Scald Earth Power and Sludge Bomb, but that's just me. I think this can work for sure for it. Now, Poison Ground is pretty good typing. Poison Point, I don't really feel like that makes a lot of sense because you're not a pointy Pokemon. You're not spiky like Nidoqueen or Toxapex or something like that, or Quillfish. Right, so why do you Poison Point? I think it should be Poison Touch like Seismitoad. That's my personal opinion. Then you got Water Absorb and Unaware, which are returning, and I think that's fantastic. Water Absorb is the one you want to run most of the time, because as opposed to Quagsire, which is neutral with water, you are weak to water, and this gives you an immunity to that instead. And so now you're only really weak to, at this point, Psychic and Ground, and that's about it. Off the top of my head. Oh, and Ice. Psychic, Ground, and Ice. So Water Absorb I think is really good. Unaware is probably a little bit less good just because you do have tanky HP stat and a good SpDef stat, but unless you're dealing with specific special threats, I think Water Absorb is just going to be better. And I don't think that in this metagame where they've nerfed recovery options that you can be able to stall things out with Unaware as well. So I think Water Absorb is probably going to see more usage. But this could be one of those statements that doesn't age very well. So that's the fun of these videos, is that you get to look back on it and say, oh, that was wrong. Well, how was I supposed to know? This is the past that I'm talking from. Next up, we got Annihilate. Annihilate is the Primeape evolution, and it once again gets a little bit tankier, a little more attack. It actually loses 5 speed, which is a little bit sad, but it sort of makes sense. And that's what they usually do with these guys anyway. You are still using the same abilities, so I don't really have too much more to say about this. And then finally, we actually have to look at Tauros, because it's at the top of the list. So Tauros, the different forms all match each other in terms of stats, and you get a little more attack and a little more defense for a little bit less speed. So they actually removed some of the special attack from normal Tauros, so they've sort of optimized this spread. And let's look at the abilities it gets. So it gets a bit Intimidate and Anger Point still, but then it loses Sheer Force, and it gets Cudchew instead. And Cudchew is that ability Fergraf had, where you eat a berry now and you eat a berry in the next turn. And I think that's a pretty bad ability for Tauros. You're going to want to run Intimidate on this. Now, this is a little bit bulkier for Tauros, so you're going to be able to take a couple more hits than normal Tauros would, I think. At least on the physical side, with Intimidate being the one you're going to have to use, and having that 10 extra defense points. I think it's going to be a little bit tanky in Tauros. Now, it's a bit unfortunate that you can't run Sheer Force, because Sheer Force is a really powerful ability that allows you to run the Life Orb, and it boosts certain moves, but let's consider this. You already have 10 more attack points, and what's the difference between a normal type Sheer Force boosted Body Slam or Rock Climb and a Stab Close Combat? Stab Close Combat is 120 base power and can be super effective on certain Pokemon. Whereas a move that can never be super effective and is only like 90 at the best case scenario base power, being boosted by sheer force. I think it actually comes out in the wash in the end, really. And so I think they're going to be similarly powerful, and so the only difference is that the normal Tauros is going to be fast and these guys are going to be a little bit slower, and that is going to be a hindrance that you do have to consider. But I think a choice Scarf Tauros like this definitely could be really scary in the lower tiers, so I'm really looking forward to using this. I will talk about one last thing. We are running quite long, but that's okay. Gallade here. Gallade, I got wind of this, and so we're going to talk about it. It got a new ability. It got the Sharpness ability. We talked about that previously with Cleavor. Now, Gallade has Psycho Cut, which is stab, and I prefer Psycho Cut to Zen Headbutt for two reasons. One, you don't make contact, and I don't like running protective pads on my Gallade, so having Psycho Cut is really nice. And then you also have Leaf Blade, which is a cutting ability, and you have Night Slash, so it's got a few moves that cut. It actually got a new move this generation. If you look at new moves, you go to the bottom. Aqua Cutter. So Quaxwell, which is the middle duck starter, gets a move called Aqua Cutter, which is 70 base power and it has a high crit chance. So it's basically like Psycho Cut. But Gallade also gets this one, which is super cool. So now Gallade gets Psycho Cut, it gets Aqua Cutter, Leaf Blade, Night Slash. How many even get X's? I don't even know. So you've got all sorts of cutting options. Now, will you use those options? It's hard to say. But at the very least, you have the ability to boost some of your moves that previously weren't getting boosted. Like, Gallade really doesn't get to use its ability very often. Justified is not a very good move on Gallade because it's very rare that you get hit by a dark type move. When you do, it's a neutral hit. Gallade doesn't have a great defense stat. Usually it's a defensive knockoff, or it's a knockoff you're having to take. And so having that 1.5 boost is okay, but it's not usually happening. And if it is, you're having to take damage for it. This gives you a free attack boost. However, what I will say, and this is a pretty big thing, before you get too hyped about Gallade. Gallade's strongest move was close combat, and it will remain close combat as far as I can tell. Now, close combat is not a slicing move. So, this does not boost the attack ceiling of Gallade. It only boosts the attack floor of Gallade. Because what you're saying is that close combat doesn't get any more powerful. And in fact, if you run slicing, what was this called? Sharpness. If you run Sharpness, the ability, then you don't even have the option to get the justified boost, right? You have to just deal with your base attack stat when using close combat. So the most powerful move you had isn't going to get any stronger. The only difference now is that I get to run Psycho Cut over Zen Headbutt, which thank goodness, because I hate Zen Headbutt anyway. And then you get to run a very powerful Leaf Blade, if that's something you want. Now you're probably going to run Swords Dance on this guy, because you almost always want to run on a non-choice Gallade Swords Dance. And then you run Close Combat, because you have to. And you run Psycho Cut, because it's your other stab. And then what are you going to run? Knockoff, Triple Axle, in which case those don't help you at all anyway. So this move is only helping you with Psycho Cut. So is it really that good of an ability? That remains to be seen. But at the very least, I am glad that they gave Gallade another toy to play with. Gallade has so many cool moves, and if only it had a better stat distribution, I think it could be a really good Pokemon, right? If you give it 115 speed and 80 spit up instead, it would have been a great Pokemon. But it's a little bit too slow and doesn't really have anything too terribly interesting. It doesn't have Trace like Gardevoir does. So, I just wanted to mention that because it is sort of important to the channel. And I was pretty excited when I heard about it. But I don't think that it will be particularly strong. Anyway, that concludes my initial look at the new Pokemon that have been leaked for Scarlet and Violet. It's been a very long video, but at the end of the day, 2-3 years from now, we can look back at this and we can say, Rawls, you didn't know anything about what you were talking about. And that's true, I don't. I'm just making this up as I go along. But that's the fun of it. Anyway, that'll be it for me today. I'll catch you guys next time.